Hey guys, it's Jimbo's Grapes here with another tutorial video. And to start things off, this is going to be kind of a new player friendly tips and tricks yada yada video. I'm going to go over several different topics. But the main thing is uh, this is a sandbox game. It's a game where it's experimental, experimenting and discovering and trying to figure out your own thing. For me personally, that's one of the most enjoyable things in this game. So, if you're stuck on something or you want some more general ideas, awesome, watch through the video. But I would highly encourage you try things for yourself first. Um, Later on in the video, I'm going to go over some ways to make Nick. Making Nick in this game is actually fairly simple. Getting yourself set up with a mech, even a heavy mech, is not too hard. It's very doable, even for new players. And yeah, so really don't be afraid to try things out. Myself, I've lost pretty much any bot you can think of in this game. I've lost it, except for some of the destroyers. I've lost a destroyer. I haven't lost some of them, but yeah, basically, if you can think of something in this game, I've lost it trying new things, experimenting, trying to push the limits of what I can do with my accounts, and that's a big part of the fun. And the lovely thing about this game is absolutely anything you lose, you can get back. It just takes a little bit more time or a little bit more ingenuity. So, with that out of the way, I do want to get over some general fittings because I've seen a lot of people asking about more or less how you fit your robot. So I've got two different, I've got a combat character here, and then I've got a industrial character here. If I open that one up, I've got an industrial character here. So I'm going to kind of go over how you would go about fitting these two different types of robots. And it also kind of depends on what you're going to be doing. So first off, I'll go over some combat basics. So if I open up my fit here, this right here is my fit I've got for doing bosses, but in general, the more or less the idea is if you're on your own, if you're doing things on your own, you're going to want to have one of these, an armor repair. If you're in an assault bot, you'll use a small one. If you're in a mech or a heavy mech, you'll want to do a medium one. And again, this is if you're solo. You generally want to have some amount of laser tunings. And then depending on what you're fighting, you might fit some sort of anti-E-war in here. So this particular one has got an ECM, which I think was actually a mistake. I'm pretty sure this guy was supposed to have an ECCM. So that's this module right here. What this module does and why you're going to want to use these is they add something that's called sensor strength modification. So the more sensor strength you have, the less susceptible you are to E-war. So if you find that you're losing your targets a lot, if you're getting ECM'd, it's called in this game, that's where they break your lock, you might want to try experimenting with a couple of these. Now, it doesn't guarantee that you won't ever get ECM'd, but it greatly reduces the odds of you getting ECM'd. So if you're in a solo fit, having an ECM can be can go a really long way, especially if you're fighting something like industrial robots, or bosses, which tend to have a little bit more E-war. Next thing I'll talk about is sensor amplifiers. This is something that is a little bit debated, but for myself personally, I think locking time is one of the most important stats in the game. You can have up to 2 sensor amplifiers on you, whether those be on the boat, on the mech by itself, or if you're getting a remote sensor amp. So if you've got a friend or if you're doing multiple accounts, you can have somebody else give you sensor boosting with a remote sensor amplifier. But you do want to try and have 2 of these. Some people prefer to have 1 and then fit an extra tuning in. Again, myself, I think that 2 sensor amplifiers is by far superior. But again, this is one of those things that you're really going to want to try and experiment with yourself. Okay, so now that we've got the head slots out of the way, you're going to want to have some locking time, some damage modifiers, and the last one's a bit more of a flex slot where you can have either more damage or you can have some E-war resistant or anything else that you might want to try out with. There's range extenders, there's things that can increase your CPU if you're having trouble fitting, There's a lot of different ways that you can go with your last slot or two, and you can even swap out, if you find you're still getting ECM'd a lot, you can even swap out a laser tuning for another ECCM, or again, whatever you see fit. Range extenders, if you're trying to do something at range, these are also a really good option to have. These stack with each other, so the more you have, the more they give you. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is the weapons. If I go open the research tab, here's just another really quick tip. If you want to see any item in the game, or most items in the game, opening your research tab is a really good way to just look through all of the items. You can right click, you can hit information on them. You can also right click and go to the market. I find the research window is actually way better laid out as opposed to just looking on the market. If you look on the market and you try to find equipment, you got to go through a ton of different little tabs, weapons, and then I don't know, what kind of weapons do Thelodika bots use? That's the one I'm using. Oh, right, it's lasers. Okay, so you even need to know that to begin with, that Thelodika uses lasers. And then you go to lasers, and then there's all these. Like, this is quite a lot more than just going here and then going, okay, there it is. So really quick tip there, looking through here. So there's two different types of weapons in this game. There's turret weapons and there's missile weapons. The only faction that mains in missile weapons is Pellistal. So Pellistal is a little bit special in that regard, because if you're going to be looking to fit into multiple bots, missiles have got different extensions than the other three. So that'd be Nimquil, Thelodika, and then also the common ones. So if we look at the common ones, these are classified as turrets. Whereas Pellistal, if you look at their weapons, these are classified as missiles. You can see here, if I look at my bot fitting, this one is filling a turret slot, whereas this one is filling a missile slot. So there's a really important distinction there. And again, Nimquil, Thelodika, and also the Syndicate, that's where you get from the Syndicate supplies. So if you look at something like the Echelon, which is the Syndicate mech, specializes in firearms, that's these weapons right here in the common tree. So that's these weapons right here. So in general, most bots will have 4 to 6 turret slots, and then they might have 1 or 2 missile slots. So if we look at something like a Cane, do I have a Cane in here? I do not. But a Cane has got 2 missile slots, whereas the Artemis only has got 1 missile slot, but that's because it's got a couple extra head and leg slots. So the reason I make the distinction between missiles and turrets is turrets almost always have got 2 different types of weapon that they have. They all have got a long-range weapon and a short-range weapon. For assault bots, that's not the case. Assault bots, the smaller bots, so that's the lights and the assaults, have only got 1 type of weapon, and they're more of a general use. Once you start getting into mechs, mechs actually have 2 different types of weapons. They've always got a short-range weapon. So for the Cane, for example, their short-range weapon is the Gauss gun, and then their long-range weapon is the EM gun. And you can look here, they've got a 175 meter range and a 310 meter range. So depending on what you're doing, if you've got a healer or a Logi bot and you want to do things faster and close up, generally you're going to want to go with close-range weapons. So this guy in particular, when we look at Thelodika, they've got LCL, so that's the short-range weapons, and they've got HCL. So this is low caliber and high caliber, if we look at it. So the low weapons, the short-range weapons, do a lot more damage. So this guy in particular, I've designed this bot to do bosses. So when I'm doing bosses, you can't really, you could cheese them, but it takes a lot longer. And when you're competing with other people to try and get bosses as quickly as possible, I want to go a bit faster, so I like to get up close and personal. And I know how much damage they do, so I know that I can actually out-heal the incoming damage. One thing you can do in this game is you can shoot things at a far range, especially NPCs, and then you can actually kite them and run away from them, and you'll never even get hit. This bot was designed to get hit, to be able to get hit. That's why it's got a lot of when we get to this, we've got a lot of resistance in the low slots. So in general, as I said, we've got two different types of weapons. We've got short range and long range. Short range do more damage. Long range, obviously, their advantage is that they've got further range. The exception to this, as I've said, is the missiles. So again, if we open research, you'll see that for our medium missiles, there's actually only one type. There's not another type. What missiles do, as opposed to turret weapons, is they've actually got different ammo types. So they've got compact missiles, and they've got ballistic missiles. So if we open these up, you can see that they have actually got different optimal ranges. So their long range missile has got a 350 meter range, and the short range missile has got a 180 meter range. It doesn't matter. You can only fit the one type of turret. The missile is always going to be the same. The missile launcher is always going to be the same. It's actually the ammo that determines whether or not you're short or long range. Obviously, there's a big benefit here because if you're in a missile bot, you can equip both types of ammos and then adjust yourself according to what you're doing or what the situation is. Another thing to consider is that there's some E-War modifiers in the chassis slots. That's all. This is the chassis, so head, chassis, and legs. So again, if we go back to research, there's things like drainers. So if we look back to the common 2, there's these things, drainers, where they actually drain energy. I don't play with these too much, and I believe Pelistol has got the energy neutralizers. So these take a lot of energy. They drain a lot of energy from the opponent, but they don't actually give it to you, whereas the drainers will actually suck it and give it to your robot. So something like a Mesmer, which is a heavy mech, if we look at a Mesmer's actually got a 7th chassis slot specifically with the miscellaneous. So what a lot of people like to do is they actually like to put a drainer in here because it helps keep your accumulator up. If you're draining, you're constantly actually getting more energy. It's a little bit more micromanagement, but it's one of those things that keeps the Mesmer really, really strong, especially if you're doing something like this where you've got 2 repairers. Repairers are really, really accumulator heavy. They take a lot of accumulator. If we look at that, they take 330 accumulator. You compare that to something like a weapon, the weapon only takes 30 accumulator. So one of these is actually about as much as 10 weapons firing off. So repairers take a lot, which is why some people like to have drainers in their Mesmer in that 7th slot. Okay, let's go back to the Artemis. So you can also do that. That's this miscellaneous slot right here. You can see it's got a little, it's almost like a little star. That's for miscellaneous. So there's also options there. Now, if you're just doing PvE, if you're fighting NPCs, I wouldn't really recommend using those slots for anything other than weapons. Generally, weapons are going to be doing a lot more for you than any of those other tricky things. However, in PvP, things like neutralizers and drainers can really actually be the difference between a battle. So it's something to consider if you are getting into PvP. If you are playing this game, I would highly recommend you do PvP. It's some of the best I've ever done in any MMO. But that out of the way, if you're just doing PvE, you generally want to just go full on weapons as much as you can. A lot of people, if you don't have the skills that I do, they actually don't even put a missile slot in. They just take this out. And you'll see that actually really frees up a lot of your fitting requirements. Now I've been playing this game for 3 years and I've gotten a lot of extension points that are pretty much all maxed. So for me, it's not a big issue. I can actually include these and it's not going to make it so that I'm not able to fly this robot. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is leg slots. So there's lots of options for leg slots. One really important thing is if we look at our weapon here, we've got this stat called hit dispersion. So how hit dispersion works is if you look at a robot, and this is where it really depends what you're fighting against. If we look at a robot, they've got this one stat called surface size. So my eyes are bugging out a little bit, but we see the stat here, surface size. So what surface size means is if something's got a 12 meter surface size, if something's got a hit dispersion that's higher than that, it's actually going to lower the chance that this is able to be hit. So if you look at something like a large weapon, Oh, this is actually a bad example, but let's go to the research and let's look at a large weapon, because large weapons on the destroyers have got really bad hit dispersion. We see this has got a hit dispersion of 40. So with a surface size of 12 meters and a hit dispersion of 40, that means that this is only going to hit this target about 1/4 of the time. About 1/3 to 1/4 of the time, because this hit dispersion is almost 4 times as much as the surface hit size. Missiles act a little bit differently, and I'll go over those in a second. They've actually got something that's called explosion radius. So if we look at the large sonic compact, they've got this stat called explosion radius. So explosion size is 37.5. The interesting thing about missiles is they actually always hit. Now this doesn't do splash damage. So if you shoot a missile into a group of enemies, it doesn't actually hit all of those enemies. What explosion size means is it's how much damage it does relative to the surface size of a robot. So again, let's go back to this robot for an example. It's got a 12-meter surface size, and this one's got an explosion size of 37. It's about 3 times as much. We'll just say it is 3 times as much for simplicity's sake. That means that this weapon is going to do 1/3 the damage to this robot. Now, if we look at something like a medium sonic with a 12.5-meter range, this is basically going to be doing 100% of the damage to this robot. That's how explosion size works. If you're double the explosion size of your target, that means only half of that missile's impact is actually going to hit the target, which means it's going to do half as much damage. I know that's a little bit of a weird mechanic, and if you think about it logically, it doesn't really make sense. You'd think that explosion size would be something like area damage, but that's basically the way that they balance out the different types of robots in this game based on size class. So why am I bringing that up? The reason I'm bringing that up is because we're going to talk about some of the leg slots. So if you're in a mech and you're fighting assault bots, which is something that can be really good to do because you do a ton of damage and you're one class up, so you're actually quite a bit stronger than assault bots, and it can be quite profitable to do that. You're going to want these things called weapon stabilizers. I have a ton of these. You can see here it actually lowers the explosion size and the hit dispersion. So again, if we look at this, and I believe I should have some weapon stabilizers in here, I do. If we look at my hit dispersion, and let's just bring up a Baphomet for an example. So this has got a surface size of 6 meters. My hit dispersion is 6.9 meters, which means I'm going to miss about 15% of the time, which is really bad. However, if I throw one of these on, you can see my hit dispersion has now went down to 5.86, so it's below. Now I'm going to hit 100% of the time because my hit dispersion is less than the surface size of this robot. Again, for missiles, it's not whether you hit or miss, it's how much damage it does. This is why missiles can actually be really nice for fighting smaller bots, because you're always going to hit, but it's less burst damage and it's more consistent damage. So again, depending on what you're fighting, if you're fighting assault bots, they don't hit as hard, so throwing a couple weapon stabilizers might be a really good idea. And I believe I need to reopen this because sometimes the game doesn't like to register when you switch items. There we go. So we've talked about weapon stabilizers. Now the other main things you're going to want in your low slots are energy injectors or accumulator rechargers. If you're doing long-term grinding, energy injectors are not a good option. The reason for this is the energy injector charges are extremely heavy, so you'll only be able to bring a small amount of them with you. So if you're going to plan on farming a single spot for, say, an hour or even half an hour or more than that, this is not something that you could run constantly and expect to keep your energy up, because you will run out of charges. The more reasonable thing to do is, first off, you want to try and get your skills up so that you don't have to worry about accumulator, but if that's not an option, accumulator rechargers are the go-to for having your bot be more accumulator stable. If you find that you're running out of energy, if you can't run your medium repair or your small repair enough to keep your robot alive or keep your health up really good, you might want to look into fitting something like an accumulator recharger. These allow your robot to regain accumulator a lot faster. The next thing that's really important is universal armors and factional or specific armors. So universal armors are just what they say. They give you a little bit of everything. Now, specific armors actually give you more overall than what these do. So if we count these up, these give you 70, and 70 is 140, whereas this one, when it's active, actually gives you 150. So it's actually, if you were going to fit 4 universal armors on, you would actually be better off fitting one of each different type instead of 4 of these. Now, depending on what you're fighting, you're going to want to mix this around a little bit. So if you're fighting, say, green bots, you're going to want to put seismic resistance on. And that's what I was doing with this guy at this point in time. I like to have a little bit of universal. The reason for that is most bots actually use different types of ammo. So again, if we look at the different types of ammo and we look at Pelistol, a lot of bots will actually end up using these types of ammo. So if we look at this one does 100% seismic damage. But if we look at something like the Chemo one, it actually does 60 seismic damage and it does 45 chemical damage. This is why I like to fit a mix of universals and a mix of specific targeted plates. Or sorry, specifically targeted armor. So again, if I'm fighting green, I'll usually have 1 green one and 2 universals. If I was fighting blue, I'd swap this out for a blue. Just like that. Just 1 second. Okay. So those are the main low slots that you're going to look at. The last thing I'm going to talk about that's also really important. Actually, sorry, there's 2 different things here. These are really, there's a lot of other low slot things. I don't want to get too much into them, but the other big ones are lightweight frames. So these, if you're doing missions, I would say are almost essential, especially if you want to get more profit for the amount of time that you put in. The top speed modifier of 25% is just, it's insane. It's really, really important. Now do keep in mind, you lose armor and you lose demob resistance. So what demob resistance is, it means if somebody puts a demob on you, which is a module that slows you down, that means it's going to actually impact you 25% more. So if it's already lowering your speed by 50%, it's going to end up lowering your speed by 75%. So just keep that in mind. If you are getting a little bit dangerous and you're fighting something that's got a lot of E-War, you might not be able to get away if you've got the lightweight frame on. But in general, these are really, really essential for missioning, just so you can get around quicker. The next thing we're going to talk about is plates. So if we go to, it's the Ladika. These add a lot of extra armor, and it's actually also gets bonuses from your extensions, and it gives you demobilizer resistance. So what a lot of people like to do is they like to put on a lightweight frame and an armor plate. You end up going faster, and it also reduces a lot of the drawbacks of having that lightweight frame on. The last thing I'm going to talk about is these guys right here, ERP. Now this is a bit more of an advanced thing, and I'm going to do a video showing how to do solo taps using these. So I don't want to get too much in depth right now, but basically what these do is as you get hit, it actually recovers accumulator for you. So these can be a really, really good way of generating accumulator if you're doing something that is hitting you really, really hard. So that's pretty much all I have to say about combat fits. As far as PvE is concerned, we're going to very briefly talk about PvP now. And I'm just going to show one of my PvP fits. So this is a PvP fit right here. What I've seen some people do, and again, I really like to go full damage, and these should actually probably be long range lasers, but I actually kind of ran out of my long range lasers, so I'm building more right now. But you'll see I've got a little bit more E-War on here. My bottom slots, I've got this combo like I was talking about before, the medium armor plate and the lightweight frame. This is really, really typical. This one could really be anything, but I've got the energy injectors. If you're doing PvP, you almost always want to have energy injectors because these are just so good for getting your energy up and being able to repair yourself. You can see I've got a demob here. So there's a lot of different cool tactics and items for PvP. And I'm just going to go over all of them really briefly. These are things that you need to experiment with yourself. But every single faction has got an E-War thing. So neutralizers, these are for draining accumulator. If you're fighting any or other sort of E-War, or if you're fighting things like healing bots that usually have really good accumulator, these can drain them so that they're basically useless. Any sort of shield bots, ECM, this is the Nimquil one. ECM is one of the best things. It breaks locks, and again, this is why you really want to have multiple sensor amps, because then you can lock up again. But yeah, ECMs are really strong. Veladika is probably the most lackluster one. In combination with ECMs, if you had a really big group, this is something that could actually be very useful, but sensor suppressors lower the locking time. So if you really wanted to isolate a single unit or 2 units, sensor suppressors plus ECMs could basically lock somebody completely out of a fight. Then the other one that I wanted to talk about, the last one, was the drainers. And again, these act similar, but not as effective. Usually if you're in PvP, you don't generally want to be using drainers as much. You more or less want to stick with the neutralizers, because that's kind of your main goal. Is you're not really looking to drain, you're looking to neutralize. Okay, so again, experimenting with those, mixing those around, you'll be able to get yourself a really nice PvP fit. This is a good example here. You could also switch this out for a neutralizer, but I just don't have any right now. And that is something that some people like to do. Let's actually just show how that works. Assuming that some of them are on here, good. So again, you can see it shows that it's one of these slots right here. If I just plop this in instead, and I believe, oh, I actually don't need to. So this is what some people really like to do. Like, this is one of the meta, quote unquote meta Artemis fits. This right here is a really solid PvP fit. The only other thing that you might change is you might swap this one out, this one seismic armor out for something else. But in general, this is kind of like a meta PvP fit right here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is some industrial fits. And these ones are a little bit less complicated. There's a little bit less nuance here. Basically, if you're harvesting, you want to have full industrial tunings, you want to have a shield, and then you want to have some accumulator rechargers. And if you're doing missions like this bot is, you might want to have a lightweight frame. If you're not doing missions, you might want to skip on the lightweight frame and just get a little bit more accumulator, especially if you're on PvP islands. The last thing you're going to want to consider is throwing a missile launcher in here. Doesn't have to be a high tier one. The reason you'd want to do this is because on Alpha Islands, there's roaming NPCs that are very annoying, and just having one of these in your robot can go a long way for dealing with those so that they're less annoying. So for harvest bots, harvesters, industrial tunings, shield, and maybe a missile launcher. I don't actually think I have any set up right now, so I'll just unstack one of these. And we'll just actually fit this. It's a pretty simple fit. So for these ones, same idea. Medium shield generator. You want to have your medium miners. Fill all of those up. Missile launcher. And I'll go with a light missile launcher. Tunings. So this is where there's a little bit of debate. You almost always want to have at least your 5 tunings, unless you're also having a Nexus bot. The last point of contention is if you're doing liquid, you can fit all 6 tunings in here. But what I personally like to do is I like to have a geoscanner, especially if I'm doing non-liquid mining. I always have a geoscanner in just so if I'm doing this on multiple accounts, then I can actually see what's going on. I've got a video of me mining, and I'll link that in the description. Let me make a note of that. Mining video. So yeah, I'll link the mining video in the description. You guys can see how I mine and you'll see why I like to have a geoscanner. But this is basically the fit here. Last thing you'd want is your accumulator rechargers. So yeah, so just like this, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, pretty obvious, not really a lot of nuance here, but this is basically going to be the best way to get the most out of your mining units. So if you're a little bit confused about how to get more mining, it's pretty straightforward. The biggest thing is your industrial tunings. These add a lot of extra mining. So if you're not using industrial tunings, they're also quite cheap on the market. You can see 1.4 million. One of the cheapest T4 modules that's out there. So definitely try to get your hands on some T4 mining modules. It'll increase the amount of yield that you get by quite a lot, and your nick per hour will go up substantially. So there's some general fits. And the next thing we're going to talk about is spending your EP. Okay, so again, this is something that I don't want to spend too much time on. The main thing with spending EP that you need to remember is you can always get more EP. I just want to go over some general ideas here. I don't want to go so much into, what things are useful, because I've already done a video on that, which again, I'll link in the description. But in general, if you, and this is going to be a bad example, I don't really have any accounts that have low EP. So you can see I've got 3 million EP on this account, so you're going to see a lot of skills are at 10. But the general idea is if you click on the information here and you say, hey, that looks like something that I might like, level it up to level 5. How EP works in this game is from 1 to 5, it's got basically a linear increase, but then when you start to get over 5, it actually starts to increase exponentially how much it costs to get a skill. So if you think a skill is interesting or it might be useful for what you want to do, level it up to 5. If you think it's really, really good, level it up to about 8 and try it out. Then once you've leveled all the skills that you like up to 5 or 8, and you're starting to look for new things to do or more ways to improve your robot, then you start leveling up to 10. You really, really don't want to level any skills up to 10, with the exception of advanced and basic robotics. These ones give the main bonuses to all of your robots. If you look here at the advanced robotics, this is what's giving me more bonuses than anything else here. So this is the laser damage. The advanced robotics skill on every single bot is almost always the primary thing that gives the bonuses to your bots. So for example, Rivelers, it gives you mining yield. For Artemises, it gives you laser damage. For other robots, it gives you, if it's an E-War robot, it gives you E-War, etc., etc. This one right here, Combat Robot Specialist, this one's usually not as good. You can see these are kind of more, they're a little bit less important skills. I mean, laser optimal range is really good, but in other robots, it's not as important. High-tech robots, again, this is only for MK2 bots, so if you're just starting out, you're probably not going to have too many MK2 bots. They're a bit more expensive and they're harder to get. So another one that you don't really want to look at. Yeah, I'm kind of digressing here. I don't want to go too much into every single individual skill. The only other one that you might want to get up to 10 is your specific factional ones. And the reason for that is because if we look at the extension requirements for MK2 heavy mechs, these actually require you, in order to fly these are, in order to pilot these are some of the best robots in the game, the MK2 heavies. You need to have that extension to level 10. So these, if you're really dead set on being, say, a Thelodika pilot, that's probably something that you're also going to want to get to 10. Other than those two exceptions, the robotics, so advanced, basic, and expert, and then also your specific ones, so like something like industrial, for getting a Riveler MK2, which is one of the best mining bots in the game. Other than those exceptions, you really, really want to try and avoid getting any skills to level 10, just because of that exponential growth, where it really, really starts to eat up the EP. So if we look at this one cost, these level 10 extensions cost 54,000 EP. That is a lot. It's very significant. And yeah, just looking at this, the level 10 skills require so much more than the level 9 or even level 8 skills. So just keep that in mind when you are skilling. Do not get skills to level 10 unless you've run out of things that you find are important. The only other possible exception to that is fitting things. So things like getting your CPU up. If you can't fit your robot, then everything else is a moot point. And it's also a really, really low requirement one. If I go back to my EP here, under electronics, I believe it is. So this one right here, data processing, CPU performance, this is another one that you might actually want to consider getting to level 10. The reactor expansion, just down here, this is another one. It's a one complex skill, so if you didn't know, these numbers right here actually mean something. The higher number they are, the more EP it costs. So these one complexity skills are actually also okay to get to level 10, especially the ones that have to do with your fitting requirements. So again, just to recap, general rule, skills you think you might like, get to level 5. Skills you think you really like, get to level 8. Anything to do with fitting or robotics, you can get those ones to level 10, but do it sparingly because, you know, EP is something that you do need. And then once you've got all of the skills that you really like and you look through it all and you've planned it out and you've got them to level 5 or level 8, then you can start pushing skills to level 10. But the benefit from going from 1 to 8 will be about as much EP cost as the benefit from going from 8 to 10. So just keep that in mind when you're skilling. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is group play versus solo play versus multi-boxing. So it's just kind of obvious that, sorry, I just have to put my chat blocker on. Yeah, so obviously, if you have more people, you can do more things. Now, when you're doing solo, so if I look back to my Jimbo's Grapes, I've got a couple fits in here. Thought I did at least. Give me 1 second. Okay, I found it. All of my bots were in my gear folder, which obviously they should not have been there. Okay, but I've got this thing here called the Spartan Challenge. So if we look at this, this was a design that I made in order to do solo taps. I'm going to get more into that later, and this is actually going to be a separate video that I'm going to do showing how to do taps solo. So this is where I use this thing called the ERP. And this fit basically can do some of the hardest content in the game solo, or not necessarily the hardest, but some of the most profitable content in the game solo. And it's just an MK1 bot, so this could even be improved upon further if that was something that you wanted to invest into. So the reason why solo play in this game is quite difficult is because unless you have really, really specific builds, good skills, and a lot of other things, it's really, really difficult to kind of do things. And the reason for that is you really, really, really need this thing called a Logibot. So essentially what this bot does, this is a Metis, it's one of the best things for logieing in the game because it's got this ability here, armor repair amount 50%. This robot right here basically allows me to free up a lot of my head slots. So if I go back to Jimbo's Grapes here, and I look at my, and I'm all turned around now because I've recently started to move to other islands. But okay, so this is a good example here. If we look at this bot right here, this bot is fully decked out, no sensor amps, all tank in the bottom. This bot is fully decked out in order to do PvE content. And the reason I'm able to do that and fully deck it out and get this insane amount of damage out of this bot is because I'd have something like the Logibot. So we've got these things called remote sensor amps, which lowers the locking time. So I don't have to worry about having the sensor amps on my bot. I can actually put more damage. I don't have to have an armor repair, so I don't have to waste a bunch of accumulator. I can have all of my accumulator and all of my focus going towards doing damage, so I can do these. So this bot basically acts as a complete energy battery and support bot And that allows my main bot, and this one is actually equipped to support 2 bots. So this one bot can support 2 bots. So if I'm doing 3 accounts or 4 accounts, or I've got 2 friends that I'm lodging for, we've got a couple dedicated people in our corp that really like to act as, healers. You can really start to do some harder content and some more crazy things once you end up pairing up with some other people. So if you're in a group or if you're multi-boxing, that's why you're able to do so much more stuff, and that's why I'd really recommend you either join a corp or you look into maybe playing 2 or 3 accounts, because having a Logibot opens up so much more of the game to you. You're able to do a lot more farming and harder things and more profitable things if you've got the ability to use one of these guys. Now, again, there's lots you can do as solo play. The big thing is doing missions. The other thing, like I said, so if I look at this guy and I go to equip here, this bot right here can do some really good farming as well. Like I said, doing the taps, and I'm also going to have to do that video, and I will post it and I will link it. But this bot right here is able to do taps as well, which is a really nice farming method. And this one can do it completely alone. And I don't know where all my ammo has gone. There we go. That looks better. So that's all I really want to say about group play versus solo play. It just opens up so much more of the game to you if you're playing in a group or if you multi-box with the Logi. I've also got a video showing really low entry farming with a couple accounts, so I'm also going to put that video in the description, and you can take a look at that if you're looking for some setups or some cheaper setups. This is obviously all T4'd. It's an expensive fit. I don't expect anybody new to be able to fit something like this, but I will, like I said, link some really entry-level fits in order to do some farming if you've got a friend, or if you've got a couple of guys to play with, or if you are also just going to be able to do with one account, or sorry, with multi-boxing. Okay, so the next thing I really wanted to talk about was missioning, and I actually just need a second here to jump over to my other guy. Okay, and through the power of time travel, I have gone to my missioning hub. So I'm just going to do a quick mission. We're going to go over some ways to make Nick. One of the best ways to make Nick is missioning. There's different kinds of missions. The one that I like to use to make Nick, which is safe and fast and effective, is harvest missions. So I'm going to go through this really quick. I need to go get some neuralgias. I am going to pause this in a second here, but I do want to just show something really nice that you can do. Is once you kind of know where your plants are, you can see here I've got some waypoints. That's what these little dashes are. Make sure your waypoints are actually active in your hierarchy under the filter. If I just double click on this, the plants here, you can see that. I know where all these plants are. I've already mapped them out. So if I just double click on that, this one's actually the neurologist. This one actually has all 3 different types of the plants there. So, or sorry, 3 of them. So whenever I need neuralgists or the other ones, I just double click there and the autopilot will automatically take me there. So if I'm doing this on multiple accounts, it is so easy to just go through and get the different types of plants that I need with my little hotkeys. So I'm going to pause it and I'll be back when I'm done the mission. So I just want to show just harvesting some neuralgists. You can see I'm getting 13,000 per shot of everything here. So it's going to take about 6-7 cycles to get this plant, and I will show when I get the data cycle, and I'll show the rewards I get at the end of this as well. I will also put in the description as well links to me doing missioning on Hirschfield. I've got a lot of footage of that, several hours of footage of me doing missioning on Hirschfield, both with combat and with harvesting. So I will link those videos in the description as well if you want a little bit more in-depth or a little bit more look at missioning on Hirschfield. Okay, so we've just finished the mission. Grab that using hotkeys. Click on it, V to interact, G to grab all. Click on my base here, hit V to interact, and then I'll just again autopilot right back to the base. Usually I like to hit B. B reloads your ammo. Do that every couple cycles as well. Keep that ammo up so I don't ever have to reload. Just really, really well-greased machine, or well-oiled machine when you've been doing this for a while. So again, I'll pause it and I'll show you guys the rewards once I get back in the terminal. Okay, so we're back in the terminal now. Deliver that. And as you can see, 500,000 Nick for a pretty quick mission. This could actually be a bit higher, about 40% higher, because I've only got a 3 times multiplier right now. And yeah, so missioning, harvest missions, again, one of the best ways to make Nick. The next thing I want to talk about is actually just mining and harvesting. So if we look at the market, if you are harvesting or mining, especially mining, one of the best things you can mine is actually one of the easiest things to mine, which is Titan ore. So if you look at Titan ore, you can see it's worth over 2 Nick, and you mine this stuff super fast. Really, really fast. Titan ore is one of the fastest things to mine in the game, and it's also worth some of the most. Now, you might be wondering, why the heck is that? That seems a little bit odd that it's really easy, but it's also really expensive. The reason for that is if you look at refinery, a lot of the high-end materials actually require Titan ore. So Allegor, this one right here, actually requires Titan ore. And it's one of the things that you need to make T4 gear, and also a lot of the higher end stuff. There was one other one, which I'm probably going to just forget right now. Sorry, I think it was this one, hydrobenol. So hydrobenol is another one that's required for a lot of T4 gear, a lot of the higher end mechs. You can see it also requires Titan ore. And then also titanium, which is the main thing that Titan ore is used for. Titanium is used in almost every single thing in order to build it. So that's the reason that Titan ore is worth so much, is that it's required to make almost everything in the game. So although it is the easiest thing to mine, it's also the thing that's in the most demand to mine. So keep that in mind. Don't refine your Titan ore to titanium. It's worth more as Titan ore because of those high-end things, Allegor and hydrobenol. And these are things that are required to make T4 gear, and also some of the higher, almost pretty much all the robots in the game. It's used for that as well. So Titan ore, probably the best thing to mine, especially in terms of safety. There are more rare ores. I'm not going to get into those though, because if you're mining those, you probably already know what you're doing. So Titan ore, if you're just new, it's a really, really profitable ore to mine. Any of the plants are going to be good to mine, good to harvest as well. The next thing I'm going to talk about is NPC farming. So I'm going to go quickly over where the locations of the bosses are, and just give me 1 second. Okay, so if you're going to fight NPCs, there's a couple different ways of going about it. There's bosses, there's static farms, and then there's also these things called taps, which I've talked about previously. And taps are my personal favorite thing to do. So one of the main things that you get from farming NPCs is you get this thing called plasma. So if we go to the market and we go to industrial, sorry, it's one of these things. Sorry, is raw materials. So the outposts actually buy these things straight up. And if you go to remote, the beta islands actually can buy them for up to 325 Nick a piece. So this is one of the main ways that I personally make Nick, because I farm a lot of NPCs and I get a ton of plasma. Is it the best way to get Nick? Absolutely not. Missions are generally better to get Nick than doing this. But the thing with farming NPCs is they also come with a lot of other benefits. So in order to do any industry, you need research, and you actually get research from killing NPCs. So if you kill green NPCs, they drop these things called kernels. So if we go back to here and we type in kernels, so these are actually a big reason why you want to farm NPCs, because you get these kernels. You need kernels in order to unlock research, in order to actually build stuff. So NPCs give you plasma, which is just basically straight cash. They give you kernels, which is used for industrial. They give you modules, which you can also sell or recycle or use. So modules are also really, really profitable. And then they also give you fragments, which are used for this thing called prototyping. Again, I'm not going to get too much into this. This is just kind of a base level thing. But long story short is NPCs actually give you lots of stuff other than just the plasma that you get from killing them. Although the plasma is a very, very nice part of doing them. So there are bosses in this game. This is something that's been added new. I don't remember exactly where they are. I've got the waypoints somewhere. I couldn't find them. They might have been deleted. I'm not exactly sure. But I'll just tell you guys the locations that I know. So I believe there was a boss somewhere around here. This is on New Virginia. There's a boss up here. I think it's called the Spectral Weaver. And I am actually going to show this as well. The Syndicate Radio actually shows you which bosses are up at any particular point in time. One of the really good bosses is William H. Bonney, which is right here. And if you kill him, he actually creates a teleport, which teleports you. It's kind of like an escalation. It teleports you to a second boss, which drops these things called data shards. Now, data shards are some of the most strong items in the game right now because they actually are what's used to build T4 Plus gear. So if we look at equipment and we type in enhanced, these are the current T4 Plus modules that are in the game. You can see there's Bonnie's, there's the Commandants, and then there's also Joseph's. We're going to talk about Joseph in a second here, but Bonnie is one of the ones where he drops these modules. So if we look at the industrial implements, you can see that people are buying these data shards for 120,000 nick a piece. So they drop on average 25. So 25 times 120,000. One kill of this guy, it takes about 5-10 minutes to do, will actually give you about 3 million nick. So quite a lot of nick for one kill on these bosses. The Joseph ones are worth about twice as much because they give a bit better modules. That's about 6 million nick for a kill on One-Eyed Joseph. So yeah, so Bonnie is right here. Really, really good boss to kill. On top of all of the other stuff that they give you. That's kernels, plasma, and then also lots of modules. Okay, so if you go to Hirschfield now, Joseph is down here. There's another boss in this corner. There's another boss, I believe he's over here. He might be up here though, but I'm pretty sure he's over here. And then there's another boss in here. And I believe that's all of them. And again, I'm just doing these locations from memory. I don't kill the bosses as much as some other people do, but there are bosses in those areas. The other thing is static farming, which the Hirschfield is split into different sectors. There's the sector up here is the blue bots. The sector over here is the yellow bots. The sector down here is the green bots. And then the sector over here is the industrial and the syndicate bots. So for a long time, this right here used to be one of the best locations to farm in the game for common kernels. It's a set of syndicate bots and it gives a lot of kernels and it's not too hard to do. If you have range, you can sit back in this little pathway over here and actually shoot the NPCs and they won't be able to shoot you back. There's 3 more locations I'm going to talk about. There's a really easy industrial spot to kill right here, which drops industrial kernels and common and lots of good loot. And it's a little bit easier to do. There's a harder one that is right here. I've got video of me doing that as well, which I will link in the description. So there's a video of me farming the industrial kernels right here. And then over here is a fairly difficult syndicate spawn, but also fairly profitable. You get a lot of stuff, a lot of modules, a lot of kernels, a lot of really, really good stuff with this spawn that's right here. It's hard to do though, so you either need to do it at range or you need to have a group of people doing it, but it's a really, really good spawn as well. Other than that, if you need green kernels, the area over here is good. If you need yellow kernels, the area up here, there's lots of different spawns of varying difficulty. And then blue kernels is the section up here. Again, there's lots of different spawns of varying difficulty. If you are doing solo, I would recommend you stick to farming assaults and lights. And again, I'm going to create a video showing how to do taps, which is probably one of the best things to do. Now, I don't want to go over taps too much because I've probably got a million videos on them already. But again, I will link several of those in the description. Please take a look at those because taps is one of the ways that I farm the most. That's why I have so many videos on them already, which is why I don't want to go too much into detail on them here. The last thing I will talk about is there's two other bosses, actually three other bosses. There's the pit boss, which is a giant roaming NPC. Generally, what will happen is people will speak in general chat when they want to do the pit boss. If you ever see that, make sure you join them because it's a very, very profitable boss to kill. It's really, really tanky, really, really difficult, but if you have a big group of people, it's no problem and it gives you a ton of loot. The Commandant is the hardest boss in the game, and you cannot do that unless you've got some of the highest stuff in the game. So that might be something that you could look forward to in the future. There's videos of him being done on YouTube as well. I don't know if I've got any of that, but I know that there are some out there. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is artifacting, which I believe I've got an artifacting guy here. I do. So I like to artifact in a Hermes, and generally, basically what this is if you have a geoscanner, you can use any bot for this, but I like a Hermes because he's actually got bonuses for artifacting. He's got geoscanner accuracy and also artifact scanning range. This is kind of more or less the artifacting bot, but you can use any bot that you want. Some people like ones with bigger cargo, some people like ones that are faster. I like this guy just because he is the artifacting bot, so that's the one that I like to use. So you need these things called scanner charges. There's different ranges, so this one can shoot up to 50 kilometers, there's one that's 30, and there's one that's 10. I just use the 50 ones, I don't bother with the other ones, but if you want to get a little bit more efficient with it, you can use those as well. Just wait for my bot to deploy here. So generally, or the idea behind this is you activate this, it shows a bunch of artifacts here, and you see this little dash right here, you can actually spin around and you can go towards where the dash is. So if I zoom in here and I set my marker range to 7,000. Okay, so if I go around here, this artifact, this one right here, is going to be around here. So I just autopilot there, and I'll show you guys the artifact that I get when I get there, and I'll talk a little bit more about it once I'm done running over there. So I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, so we're near our artifact now, so I'll pop this again. Okay, it's got a little bit more accurate now. Again, trying to keep this little dash facing forward. Once it turns yellow, that means I'm basically in the area. And what do we got? Oh, we actually got a Cortex. So these Cortexes are basically the main reason that you want to do this. It gives you lots of other random fun stuff as well, but that's more or less what artifacting is. So there's a lot of different types of artifacts, and I believe there's already videos on this, but basically artifacting is kind of a fun break. It lets you explore the island. So when I first started the game, one of the things that I actually really like to do was I would artifact, and then something like this, I'd be like, okay, let's open up my map. Can I do that here? Don't think you can. No, but let's open up my map. Okay, so it's about right here. Create a waypoint, and I would just make a note of the island, and I'd say, okay, 2 times rookie heavy mechs. Okay, and I actually just kind of went around the island and marked out where all of the spawns were and anything that was significant that interested me. I would also check out terminals, and I would look and see if there were good plants around them, and I would basically just explore and make waypoints all around the map for myself. And if I saw any of those bosses, I would mark them as well. So I'm actually going to delete this though, because I don't really care about that, but it is something that is good to do. So that's another way that you can make Nick. Just to show this, this guy right here is worth about 1,000,000 Nick if you were to sell it, or about 700,000. So as much as one of those harvesting missions that I showed earlier, you're not going to get cortexes all the time, and there are different levels of cortexes, but you get lots of different stuff from artifacting. There's a huge grab bag of things, and it's something that's really simple, kind of fun, and it's a good way to explore the islands and just see what's really around. So once I get back to base, we'll move on to the next topic. Okay, so again with some magic, I'm back in the base now. The last thing I want to talk about for making Nick is marketing. So just an example here, I've got 507 million of sell orders, and I've got 400 million of buy orders. So the market is a little bit soft now. It's not as good as it used to be. More people in the game means more competition, means more people making stuff, etc., etc. It just kind of is what it is. There's not a lot of people selling ore right now. I mean, hopefully that'll change in the future because ore is awesome. But yeah, obviously, market is always a great way. Actually, I need to remember to cancel this because I accidentally put up a advert the wrong way. It's a good thing I remembered that. Yeah, obviously, marketing in games has always been a really profitable thing to do. Making modules, selling modules. Yeah, there's lots of different things you can do here. I've got an industrial video that I've already done, so again, that'll be in the description. But yeah, if you want to do industry, obviously it's a great way to make money in the game, to make Nick in the game. One thing you can start out with is ammo, even just tier 1 modules. Tier 1 modules, you can grab any tier 1 module except for destroyer stuff, drag it in here, and you can make a CT. CTs are what you throw into your factory in order to actually produce stuff. So like for example, this was a CT, I threw it in here. This is what I need to make these, and then you can make them, and then you can sell them if you want to, or you can use them. Either way, obviously marketing, using the market to buy and sell stuff. This is where you'd sell all your ore if you got it, is a great way to make Nick. Okay, so the very last thing I want to talk about is goals. So there's a couple different directions I can go with this, but more or less the idea is you want to set yourself up with some goals. So things that are going to improve your account are, one, getting EP, so extensions. Whenever there's an EP event, or if you're just starting out, you get a really big multiplier. So doing pretty much any activity in this game gets you EP. So trying to get to 1,000,000 EP, which is where your multiplier drops down to 1, is a really good goal. You can basically fit to be really strong in any single thing on an account with 1,000,000 EP. I'm at the point now in my accounts where I'm starting to train into some different things. Cross training is what it's called. But you can be really good at one thing, maybe even 1.5 things if you've got 1,000,000 EP. So that's a really good goal to strive for. The next thing is assignments. You see these numbers up here? The higher these numbers are, the actual better relations you have with particular outposts, which means that they actually give you bonus building. So if I look here, you can see this relations number right here is the relations that is at 135. So my total material ratio is 236, and the relations gives me 135. It's actually more than half of my ability to do production in this particular outpost is because of my relations. So if you do plan on doing industry or building anything, missioning in order to get your relationships up is another really good goal to have. So that's actually a goal I've got with this character right now. So I was doing some missions earlier. I really want to try it. You can get up to 800, I believe, and I'm at 675 right now. That's something that I really want to work on, and it's a good goal, especially if you want to do any sort of industry in this game. And other than that, it's also just really good for making Nick. So that's a really good goal to have. The next goal, it's a little bit less obvious, but a really good goal to have is to try and get yourself into a fully fit mech. The leap from assault bots to mechs is huge in this game. Me personally, when I first started, I completely skipped doing assault bots. A really good one to start with and to aim for, you want to again kind of get in that like level 5 range with your extensions, the Echelon is a really, really strong mech, and it's super easy to obtain as well. Only 4 million nick and a couple hundred tokens. You can get this. When I first started playing on this server, I came in with a really specific plan because I had done a couple starts on servers before. My plan was to get into the Echelon and do my farming that way. I got into my Echelon within a couple hours of playing. So Echelon is a really, really good starting mech. If you already know what faction you want to go with, again, later on you can cross-train into any sort of faction that you want. Getting one of the factional mechs is also going to be a really, really huge goal to strive for. The reason I like mechs very much is they actually got bonuses to hit dispersion and explosion size. So they're really, really good at farming. They kind of have a really good balanced farming for doing light and assault, and then you can also farm some mechs with them if you've got the right setup. You might eventually want to get into heavy mechs, but for farming NPCs, getting kernels, getting plasma, that kind of thing, in my opinion, mechs actually kind of reign supreme, both in terms of efficiency. So if you lose them, you're losing not nearly as much, and then they're about like 95% as effective at farming small bots as the bigger mechs are. So that's why I really, really like mechs. They're just super efficient, super easy to get, really easy to obtain, and they've got a ton of firepower. This game isn't really like Eve. In Eve, I know you really kind of want to go through that progression where you start small, get bigger, get bigger, get bigger, and you don't really want to start jumping into battleships or higher as soon as you start. This game, I'd say, is different than that. Personally, I think getting into a mech is really, really important for starting to get stronger and start to be able to farm things. So I would recommend that you try to get EP in order to get into a mech. Again, it could be the Echelon, which is more of a neutral mech, or it could be one of the specific factions. Personally, I'd recommend Thelodika just because they've got this bonus to resistances, so they're really, really tanky. It kind of depends who you ask. There's a lot of different pluses and minuses for each mech. Like I said, I like Thelodika because their weapons have got a lot of quality of life. Like they've got really good range. They've got large clip sizes, so you don't have to reload as often. They do good damage, and they've got good resistances and good tank. Some people really like Nimqual. They've got really good armor repair. They're faster, so they're really good for doing missioning. Pellistal is really good if you want to do cheese tactics. They can shoot out super, super far. Missiles shoot in an arc, so you don't actually have to have as good of line of sight. You do have to have some line of sight, but I definitely use Pellistal for a lot of my farming when I'm doing things like flux fields. When we're doing the commandant, I basically only use the Hydra. Hydra is king as far as the absolute late game content goes. So Pellistal is also a really strong choice. But like I said, I started off with Thelodika. I really like Thelodika, especially for farming, for building up your kernels and all of that stuff. So, and like I said, Echelon's also really, really good for just starting, that is. The other nice thing about the Echelon is it actually has an even bigger bonus to hit dispersion, so it's even better at shooting small targets. So, like I said, another really good goal to shoot for is getting into a mech and fitting it up so that it's all in T4 gear. So I was going to do kind of a quick speed round, but I think I've actually covered everything that I was going to talk about in there, just talking in general. So hopefully this video helped you get started. Again, there's going to be a ton of links in the description. Check out all of those other videos. I've got a kind of a 0 to hero playlist that I did where I start with literally nothing. I start with an arc and I build up to a heavy mech. So if you really want to kind of see how to make Nick, do that or watch through that series. It's 8 episodes, about an hour long each. But the big thing is do what you want to do, have fun, and honestly, playing this game to try and be as efficient as possible is something that some people like to do, but it's really not necessary. If you're in a corp, everybody's going to be willing to help you out. Even if you're not in a corp, so many people are so friendly in this game. So many people have got so many resources. They'll give you or help you or trade you for anything that you could ever really want. If you just ask, it is an MMO, so do interact with other people. And yeah, the last goal I'll say is try to get into PvP. This game has got the absolute best PvP out of any game I've ever played. If you ever experience a 5v5 or a 10v10 or a 30 versus 30 battle in this game, there's a reason that people want this game to succeed so much, and it's because you'll never get an experience like it in any other game. It's just so incredible. So that all being said, I hope you found these tips in this video helpful, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.